Hello and welcome again to Racecraft. This time I'm doing yet another V8 Sigma, and the reason for this segment is there's a few of you out there doing these conversions, and a couple of guys have asked me if I could do a bit more detail on how the engine mount fits in the radiator support panel and all that sort of thing. So all of this will be about how the motor fits in with my kit with a Windsor. So you can mount the motor any way you like, but this is how it works with my kit. So if you buy my kit, this is what you'll get: the engine mount plate and these brackets that go onto the side that mount it up onto the chassis. Now, there's a motor there with the plate on it. It's got the rubber mounts in the sides there. And then these brackets pop in there, bolt goes through, and that's what mounts it up on the chassis rails. Now, the other thing that you will also get will be a new front bar. This is actually part of the radiator support panel and the actual radiator support panel itself. So the first thing you're going to have to do is take out the original Sigma radiator support panel. It's really in the way for the radiator that I use. Now, I use a VK to VN Commodore radiator because it's a nice big generous radiator, goes chassis rail to chassis rail, and it fits in there pretty well. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to remove this piece of tin. There's really not much to it. It's very thin material. It'll come out pretty easily. So that's gone. Then you're going to take the new bar and put that in. But what you want to do is you want to leave the two brackets in there that support the radius rods. So those radius rod brackets need to be in there. Now, the reason you're leaving that in there is so that these holes line up with these holes here, these captive threads in here, and that will pretty much locate that bar in there for you. So it sits roughly like that. Pop the bolts up from the bottom. You want to take a measurement from the ends of the chassis rails. Make sure you get it nice and square. Put the bolts in, and then that's located the bar for you. Then the radiator support panel goes in. Now, it's got these slots in it, and they line up with the pins on the bottom of your VK Commodore radiator. Now, they're slotted, so you've got a bit of wriggle room backwards and forwards, or if you decided to use a different radiator, the holes are in there to help you. Now, that just pops straight on top of that. There. Oop. Grab some bolts for that. Okay, so that will just pop straight into there. Now, I've drilled and tapped some holes in here so you can hold this on in position. So I've got these three little bolts in here. They're just there to hold it in position for you while you weld everything in. Now, in the sides here, there's a whole bunch of little holes drilled. So that's so you can pull it up to the chassis rail and weld this in. And you're going to weld the blue bar here in as well. So once you've got it all in position, weld that in, weld this in, and then the radiator can go in. Now, for ease, I've actually cut the little bar out of the top here. But you want to keep this part, the bolt-in part, because this has got the bolt holes in it for the bonnet catch. So you definitely need that piece there. So there's your VK radiator. That'll just drop straight into there. And the pins come out through the bottom there. It's sloped a little bit backwards so that the bonnet catch and everything clears it. And then that piece will simply go back on there like that. You'll need to make something to hold the top end of the radiator, but that's basically how it goes together. So now I'll get the front plate. and I'll show you how the front plate goes on. Alright, so I've got the front plate ready to go on here. I've just got this bracket sitting on here loosely. So that just slips onto the front of the engine, onto these studs that I've got in here. There we go, that's a plate on. Now, one of the things that is a little bit of a problem is that if you're using a used engine, you're probably going to find that some of these bolts that go near these water passages are rusted up, maybe even broken off. The other thing you're going to need is you're going to need bolts all sorts of different lengths. So the easiest way to do it is to buy a piece of stainless steel threaded rod, screw it into the block, put your water pump on, mark the length. So this is a long way out. Anyway, there we go. Okay, so slip your pump on. Now, for studs, use your threaded rod and just put it in the holes. There's quite a vacant hole here. Up there, all this. Put it in, screw it until the bottom's out, mark it, cut it off, and you've got yourself a set of stainless steel studs. So that's the easy way, rather than trying to buy bolts that are all exactly the same length, because they end up being some weird lengths. All right, so I'll get that bolted up. Just for now, I'm just going to spin a couple of nuts onto it just to hold the plate in place. So we're not bolting this up for the last time yet. All right, so I've got the plate sitting in position. Now I'm going to show you where to drill the holes. So this is the bracket that sits on the chassis rail. So it's already on this side. So if you look down here, you can see there's a hole drilled in the bracket. I've already drilled a pilot hole through the chassis. So you're going to drill that out, mark it, scribe it, take the plate off, slide it out of your road, and drill a large hole through there. So I'll just take this off again. I'll pull the plate off and I'll show you where the hole is. All right, so I'm going to take the pump off, take the plate off. There we go. And now I'm going to drill a large hole down through the chassis rail. So I've got the little hole there, and I'm going to drill quite a large hole down through the chassis rail. Okay, so drill a reasonably generous hole, because you've actually got this reinforcing piece that you're going to put up inside the chassis rail. All right, so I found a piece of rod here that this just happens to jam onto the end of, but you can use that. You could use a magnetic pickup, something like that, slide it up inside the rail. The important thing is you just want to get it up to line the captive thread up with the hole in the rail. So I'll just pop that in there now. There we go. And bolt in. Okay, so that's in. Now you can see that I've drilled another hole here next to the bolt hole. And the idea is that once you've put your two bolts in, tighten them up, just put a spot of weld in there, and that'll hold that reinforcing plate inside there for you. So if you've ever got to take the mount out again, it's not just going to fall down inside the chassis rail, which is going to be pretty inconvenient if you've got all the bumper bar and everything else on. So a little spot of weld through there, and bolt her up. So once you've got that side bolted in, just repeat the process on the other side. Just put your bracket on the chassis rail. Put the bolt through. Obviously this one doesn't have a rubber mount in it just now, but put your bolt through, get it in position, mark the hole, drill it. Same procedure as the other side. So that gets that side of it all mounted up. So that's about it for mounting the engine up. Oh, apart from one other thing. You want to slide the motor back as far as you possibly can. Now you can see this white mark here on the end. You want that right up against the firewall. What I like to do is actually to cut half of that lug off, just to give a little bit more clearance. And you're not going to do any harm by cutting half of it off. This is an AOD box, but if you're using a C4, that's already a little bit shorter than they are here on this AOD box. So just cut that little corner off, then the head of the bolt fits in there a little bit easier. But you really need to get that motor all the way back in order to make sure that you've got enough clearance on the front when you put the radiator in and all the other bits and pieces. So that's about it for mounting a Windsor into a Sigma. One other thing is the sump. You really don't have to do anything with the sump at all. The standard Falcon sump, early Mustang, everything but a Bronco, just fits straight in. You don't have to cut it, bash it, or anything like that. Even the cross member's got a curve in it to curve around behind the sump. So the next thing I'll do in the next video is I'll put a cylinder head on and I'll show you what I've done with extractors. Thanks for tuning in.